It's me, your chic brown chick, and I'm coming to you today because I'm following up on my previous vlog about trauma and leaning into trauma. And talking about trauma is very personal. Oh my gosh, it is one of those things where you do in therapy. Let me get comfortable. It's one of those things where you do in therapy. And because you have to get vulnerable and you have to be willing to talk about things that you may have been told never to talk about. You have to, you have to be willing to open up about things that make you look weak, or things that you have to admit you let happen. And that's tough. I'm gonna adjust this right quick. That's hard. That's serious business. And a lot of people don't want to talk about their own stuff. They rather talk about other people and what other people did to them. And that's not quite fair. And as I've gotten older and I've learned to be quiet and sit in myself and understand that there's a harmony and balance in life, that what they call the chi flow, that there's a light and a dark. And if you lean too much to the light, negative things happen. That's not good. And if you lean too much to the dark, bad things happen, because that's not good. It has to be a flow of energy between light and dark. So nobody's always good and no one's always bad. There's a flow of energy. That's what they call the chi flow, a flow. So if you're super nice all the time, that's a problem, because the energy flow has to go between light and dark. You have to accept the dark to accept the light, and you have to accept the light to accept the dark. And if you're sitting in a place of darkness and in a place of light at different periods of time in the day, different moments, that's the flow, because you have to flow. You have to flow between light and dark. You have to be all that you are. You have to live in your moment. All of that has to exist, light and dark. So do I say that to say it is okay? It is okay. And it is actually a positive and enlightening thing to flow between light and dark. It is actually good for you. It is actually healthy for you to acknowledge light and dark. And I'm going to move this, so don't be distracted. It is actually healthy and positive to flow between light and dark. You cannot live always in the light. You cannot always be on this high level of enlightenment. You will never learn if you never say there is a low vibration and I have to go to that low and experience it. And then there's a high and say, after I experience that low, I have to experience the high. It is the chi flow. It is the flow. So, and when I say leaning into trauma, I really wanted to express the beneficiality of leaning into trauma. Because once you lean into the trauma, you experience the enlightenment of the light, of the revelation of the trauma. You don't sit in the darkness, because negativity grows in darkness. Negativity is like the flower that grows in the dark. And the longer it stays in the dark, it becomes a tree. And you have now rooted in you a negativity. But when you expose the light, the one thing that negativity cannot bear is light. It either flees or it'll fight you. But one thing negativity will not do is stand in light. It will not stand in the light. It will run or fight. So, when I talk about leaning into trauma, I'm respectfully And hopefully with enlightenment, I'm going to lean into my past trauma. Not out of anger or bitterness, but as a way of opening up and allowing that light into the past and letting it die. Because only love and light can kill negative thoughts and past traumas. And if you never express it, if you never look at it, if you ignore it, and if you only express it in a negativity, in a negative light, that's where it will be. It will stay in the darkness. So, with humble respect and lovingness and the willingness to open up myself to a light, and hopefully it will allow you to breathe in and breathe out and say, I too experienced that trauma. And I too lived through it. And I too am on the other side of it. It's like an emotional yoga. When you're breathing and you're feeling and you're holding the position and then you're releasing. So, with that said, I'm going to gently and lovingly go into the past. In my life, I've been through therapy twice. I think the first time I was about 26 or 27. And I was on my own for the first time. I had my daughters with me. And it was a time where I was trying to grow mentally and emotionally. And I knew that I had a lot of past traumas in my life. I knew that I came from a very toxic and abusive environment. And I knew that I did not want to carry forth the toxicity and the abusiveness that I came from. But I didn't have any skills. And I knew I was passing on the lack of love and affection that I felt in my life onto my daughters. I knew that I was being a provider, but I wasn't being a mother. And that, to me, is what I wanted to address in therapy. And for me, I had to go back to my childhood and realize that the reason why I was incapable of expressing love and affection to my daughters is because I had never experienced love and affection from my mother. And I was born with a blessed curse. I am a nice person. And if you're a nice person, you know that is a curse. Because niceness is taken as a weakness. And if you are a nice person, you are perceived as a weak person. If you are loving and kind, you are not seen as loving and kind. You are perceived as weak. That's just a truism in our society. It may not be a true is in being a human, because it takes so much. It takes so much inner strength to be kind to people who don't deserve your kindness. I'm going to address this one more time. Downward. Okay. So, when you're a loving person who sees the beauty in everyone and forgives people for their transgressions against you. And that is actually in if you're a Christian or not, if you're a Buddhist. I would like to call myself a Messianic Buddhist. But in the Lord's Prayer, it says, forgive me as I forgive those who transgress against me. If you are a kind and forgiving person, you know how powerful that part of the prayer is. Because people transgress against you a lot. And to find within you the forgiveness that you have to give people who transgressed against you is hard. And to ask an unseen, unknowing, and you're not really sure if that power is there to give you the forgiveness, to forgive you for your transgressions, as you forgive those who transgressed against you. If you truly think about it and live within the moment that you say it, you would be humbled. You would be humbled. Because you're not sure that there is a higher power. You're not truly sure, but you are truly sure about the person who just transgressed against you. You are definite about that. You just felt it, seen it, heard it. So to forgive is on a higher level. To have forgiveness in your heart is on the level of the gods. Because you implore an unseen, unknown force to forgive you. And if you never implore that unseen, unknowing force to forgive you, you may have unforgiveness in you. And it may be something you have to explore. Because forgiveness is humility. To be humble. So, with that said, I digress into the past with humility and forgiveness. And I'm only speaking of the past to give light to the moment that I am in. I grew up with a very unaffectionate mother. And my mother unknowingly created toxicity in all her relationships. And maybe it was because she did not know. She did not know. But my mother lived in a state of self-gratification. And she may not have been nice. She was not a nice person. I don't know if she knew how to be nice. Her firstborn daughter, my older sister, is an exact replication of her. She has no idea of what kindness is and humility. Like my mother. They are both toxic. To be in a relationship with them is to be in a relationship of darkness and negativity. They only compliment you for living to their expectations of you. And if you are outside of that expectation, you are not being you. And their expectations of you are very low. I forgive them. My mother and my sister. I forgive them both. It's the only way I can truly deal with them. I have to live in a constant state of forgiveness when it comes to them. They're not going to ask me for it because they feel like in all egocentric people where their ego is in charge, they're right. They're always right. They never see the wrong or the hurt they inflict. They only see hurt coming their way. They never see the hurt going out from them because their ego tells them they're right and they're better. These type of people, you cannot change. Only thing that can humble them is life and the karma, because they're gonna reap what they sow. That's a truism. It's karma. It's in Christian Judaism, it's reaping what you sow. But they will, because they planted seeds, and it will have a harvest. It's called comeuppance. You won't be there to see it. I won't be there to see it. I don't want to see it. But they'll have their comeuppance. But that's not the point. The point is that was a trauma. I grew up in very toxic, very traumatic relationships with my mother and my sister. The worst relationships of my life were with them. The most toxic relationships in my life were with them. My relationship was with them were the worst in my whole life because it dragged out it's still a part of my life. So it is the worst part of my life is my relationships with my mother and my sister. And it's like I can't break away from them. And so I have to be honest with them. And that's why I said leaning into trauma. In the past, I leaned into it because I felt some way maybe I bought into their narrative because I felt maybe they were strong because they weren't nice. And I bought into the narrative that meanness was strength. I bought into the narrative until I got to be about 47, 48, and I realized meanness is not strength. Being verbally, emotionally, and physically violent is not strength. It's weakness. It's a psychological and emotional weakness. A mother is supposed to be a vessel that her children can pour into her. And what she pours out into her children is strength and love. My mother never had anything poured into her. Strength and love poured into her. So she was an empty vessel, and she could never pour into her children strength and love. She's gossipy. If you tell my mother something, honey, she gonna tell the world. And she gonna put you down. She compares herself to her own children. And she says, well, I'm better than this or that. Because my mother has always been felt less than. So she compares herself to the closest women to her, and that's her daughters. And my older sister does the same thing. My older sister said to me, I'm better than you. Anytime someone says they're better than anyone, they're saying to you, to that person, I have low self-esteem. I think so little of myself that I have to put you down. Not for anything that you've done to me, but because you're doing something that I don't agree with. You're a separate adult. You're an independent adult. They're telling you they don't care anything about you. At that moment, I felt so much pity for her. And that's what made me go on a journey of truth. To say to my mother and my sister, you two, I'm going to pour love into you two, because you're two empty vessels. That you first, the healing is in the truth about the darkness. These two people, they spread darkness and chaos. Anytime you're around them, it's going to be darkness and chaos. Darkness and chaos and negativity. No matter what, these two, my mother and my older sister, are going to inflict darkness and chaos because they're broken and empty vessels. And no matter how much kindness you show them, no matter how much love you show them, they're going to return to you darkness and chaos. My mother and my sister, no matter how much I've been there or tried to celebrate them, they're going to return unto me darkness and chaos. Because they're broken. They're broken. My mother and my older sister are broken people. There's nothing I can do but give them the truth and hope that truth can start healing the cracks. The reason why you feel the way you feel and the reason why you act the way you act is because you are broken. You're cracked. And until you address that crackness, that brokenness, you two will never sit in peace. There will never be a relationship that you have that will have true harmony and will never be perfect. If there isn't such a thing. My sister said she had a perfect marriage. Okay? How? You're not perfect. I'm not perfect. Nobody's perfect. Then how do you have a perfect marriage? And there's nothing perfect on this earth. When people say these things to you, it's not about you. It wasn't about me. I didn't take it personal. But I knew then, not only is my mother suffering from a psychosis, my sister is suffering from psychosis. And love tells me to tell them, you're suffering. You're suffering. My mother will never talk about anything positive. But she would definitely stay on the phone for hours about something negative. My mother and my sister have no friends. Nobody will come to the hospital if they're sick. Nobody sends flowers. The only people are the people like me or my sister's husband. We're the only two people that show up. Nobody shows up for them because they don't show up for anybody. They never show up for anybody. They're not there for anybody. And nobody's there for them. And nobody will be there for them. But the only two people that suffer then, because it's suffering. But in love, I'm telling my mother and my sister, you both are dealing with emotional and psychological issues. You're both cracked. And no matter how much love And I know from personal experience, and if you can refute it, refute it. But I've tried to pour love into you too. And I've got nothing but nastiness back. And the issue is, why do I keep continuing to try to pour love into people who show nothing but nastiness back? That's a question for me. And I can answer it. It's not just my obligation to love you, but I do love you despite yourselves. Because you're not better than me. Neither one of you are better than me. But I love you even though you've both expressed that feeling towards me. I've leaned into the trauma of loving you. I've leaned into the trauma of loving two people who don't deserve my time of day. Neither one of you. But I've leaned into that trauma. And it's been traumatic every time I've leaned into it. And I never caused it. It was always you two. So, now that I'm on the light side of this, I would say to my mother and my older sister, you two are the problem. And this family won't be a family until you two stop hating yourselves first and foremost and start loving those around you. Y'all ain't above us. Y'all ain't better than us. You don't have to look at us. You don't have to look at me and my other sister or our kids and think how much better you are. Because that's what you do. That's what you do. But if you want a healthy relationship with us, you got to show us love like we've shown y'all. And until that day comes, I think the most positive thing in the chi flow would be not to separate, but to live in truth. I will not run and I will not fight, but I will live in the truth. In the truth. And every time that person, mother or my sister, is negative, I would live in the truth of that. And I would put it right back and say, see how negative and dark you are? See how you went to this egotistical, negative, and hateful place for no reason? And when they want to go, well, I just tell the truth. No, you don't tell the truth. You're actually a liar. And I'm going to show you how you're a liar. Now, you can run from the truth, but you're going to face the light of the truth. No longer will I live in the trauma of your darkness, because that's a part of life. It's a chi flow. Eventually, dark has to give away to light. It just happens. Eventually, dark has to give away the light. And the light is the truth. That my mother and my sister are very toxic, negative, and nasty people. They are. They have nasty personality. And I hear it all the time from their interactions with other people. My sister is nasty. She has a nasty personality. And so does my mother. They both do. They both do. They're so much alike. That's why they can't get along. They're so much alike. They both have nasty personalities. Very nasty. Very toxic, nasty. And I think that's why I have a high tolerance for bad behavior, because I grew up in bad behavior. I grew up with nasty, intolerable personalities. So when I meet people with nasty, intolerable personalities, they don't reach this level of nastiness, then it doesn't even bother me. I don't even notice it. That's because of you, my mother and my sister. If y'all have a problem, y'all think, oh, I tolerate bad people. It's because of y'all. I tolerate bad people because I tolerated you all. So when we live in the light, at some point, we have to say, it's not about them anymore. It's about what I tolerated. Because at some point, as a child and growing up, I knew my mother and my sister were horrible people. I would cry when I used to have to come home from my father's house. Cry because my mother and my sister were horrible people. And at some point, I felt like I couldn't escape it. So I tolerated it and I acclimated to it. My sister's a horrible person. My sister has a horrible personality. She treated me terribly. Horribly. If I went into the details, you'd be shocked that I had never physically attacked her. If I went into the details of how my mother instigated a lot of that behavior, you'd be shocked that we weren't put in foster care. The 70s was a terrible time to be a kid. The 70s and 80s, let me tell you, terrible time to be a kid. Sorry. But now, at this point in my life, I'll be 49 years old. I don't have any animosity or anger or hatred towards my mother or my sister. But I will not let them live in the negativity. I will show them the truth all the time. I will tell them the truth. You are not a good person. And if you're not going to change, I'm not going to run from you. Nah. I'm not going to fight you, but I am going to tell you the truth. And if you don't want to hear that, fine. But when you come around me, you're going to hear the truth in the most respectful and humble way. Because I got a soul. And I care about my soul. And I don't know if there's a higher being. But if there is a higher being and that higher being is going to judge me, that higher being is going to know that I forgave the way I am praying that they forgive me. That higher being forgives me and shows me the passion and the compassion and the empathy that I'm going to show you. So to my mother and my sister, guess what? I'm going to show you empathy and compassion. But you can be well assured that you will not live in the darkness of your life anymore. I'm going to shine the light on your behavior and let you know you are a nasty, dark person. And when you come around me, I'm going to let you know that who you are and what you've been has been destructive and nasty. And you need to change, and your opinions are invalid until you are a person who can achieve on both sides. You're leaning too heavily on the negative, mom and sister. You're leaning too heavy on the dark side. So stop saging and smudging, unless you're gonna sage and smudge yourself, because you're the negative that you're feeling. You are the negative that you feel. And so unless you're going to sage and smudge, you might want to check yourself. You might want to stop wasting your money on saging. You're the darkness. If you got a problem with it, I can detail a list. I can roll out a list of some of the most negative and vile things. I can roll out a list. Not one, two, three. I can roll out a list for both of you. At least 50 things that are so negative and vile. And true that you two actually did. No judgment. Just know. I am going to live if I'm going to be a part of something, I'm only going to be in light. If there's a darkness, I'm going to be the light that shines upon it. I'm going to be the humility that I ask for from the universe. I'm going to be the forgiveness. But I don't ask the universe to allow me to keep going forward with the same foolishness. So when you lean into trauma, if you're in a traumatic relationship with your mother, your sisters, your father, your whatever, and it's one of those life relationships, don't run from it. Don't run from mom. Don't run from dad. Don't run from your siblings. Don't fight. You don't go into that psychological instinct when stress is triggered is fight or flight. You're either gonna fight them or you're gonna run from them. Don't. That's psychological immaturity. That's a psychological immaturity. What you want to do is rest in that moment and be light. Be a light force of truth. Shine the light and say, this behavior is why there's chaos. You're negative and you're dark. And they're going to run from the truth because once you call out that you are negative and dark, you feed off of this negativity and darkness because it makes you feel empowered. Once you start speaking truth to darkness, they're going to run from you. They're going to curse at you or they're going to want to fight you because they're not ready to address you on that level, eye to eye. They're not going to be ready to say, hold up. Yeah, maybe I do come with the negativity. And it's because I don't know how to talk to you. They're not going to be ready to sit in their trauma. They're not going to be ready for that. But you keep hitting them with light and truth. You keep hitting back at those negative forces in your life, and it's taking your power. You don't stop being nice. You don't stop being humble. You just start being a light of truth. And that's how you gain your power. In that light, in that darkness. You be that light. And you tell them exactly, you are wrong. You betrayed my trust. And if it be your mother, you're not cursing out, you're not dishonoring your mother by telling your mother the truth. You're not cursing at her. You're not saying, you're not calling the B word, the S. You're not cursing. You said, Mom, you betrayed my trust by telling my sister something I told you. That was between you and I. Or you betrayed my trust by telling everybody in the family my business. You, Mom, betrayed my trust. You, Mom, have not been there for me. You, Mom, have used me. You, Mom, are only there when it's good for you. You, sister, have done nothing but mean and nasty to me. You, sister, have denied me access to the bathroom. And you've denied me access to our home. You've denied me this. You've been so mean and so nasty to me. You drove me out of our home. Hit them with the truth. And while they're running away, when you see them again, say, do you want to talk about what we talked about, the last thing we talked about? They don't want to talk about it. Because at that point, they have to look at themselves. And they don't look at themselves. They look at other things because they're emotionally and psychologically immature. They're emotionally and psychologically immature. But if you're going to have a relationship that is rooted in trauma and toxicity, the only way to have that relationship is in truth. And you have to be a beacon of that light and truth. And they're going to come at you with this narcissism and this negativity and this manipulation, but you have to continue to stand in peace and calm in the truth. Not cursing, not yelling, but truth. And let it ring like a bell. And when they run away, they'll come back. And when they come back, they're going to come back with it. They're going to face the light of the truth. Because at that point, there's a chi of dark and light. And then at some point, it has to flow. And the light will go on to their side. And then the darkness will come to you. Because you had to face so much darkness, you can't help it. You're a vessel. And then you're going to have to let out that darkness. And they're going to have to face you with the light. You see, you're going to have to keep feeding light into their darkness until you force them open into light. But then their darkness is now on you. And then they're going to have to force their light on you. It's a chi flow. That's how relationships are. It has to flow. And if you're only getting darkness from this person and you're only getting light, there's no chi flow. There's no chi flow. If that person never cracks into openness, into light, if my mother and sister never crack into light, never crack to a light when they accept the light. And that means that crack has to heal, and they have to hold it for a moment. Then my balance of light, I have to accept darkness. I have to accept that I will be dark because I'm radiating light. And that once they capture the light, I will be dark to them. Because now the light is on the other side, but it has to flow back. They have to give it back to me. That's their growth. They have to transfer that light back to me to help me push that dark. And we have to go within the flow of light and dark, light and dark. And that's how relationships. And unless they're willing to have that relationship with me of chi and flowing of light and dark, and if I'm only the one pushing light to them, they're only pushing darkness to me, we're static. We're like a static pool, a cesspool of not toxicity. And that's how relationships become toxic. Because there's no flow. So I will not stop pushing light to my mother and my sister. And one day, prayerfully, that light will push so forward and so into them, they'll crack. The darkness of light will come out. And light will come out. Because unlike them, who has this, my sister's expectation of me is that I would be 300 pounds living in the projects on welfare and food stamps. That's her vision of me. And if I'm not 300 pounds in the projects living on welfare and food stamps, then I'm not my true self. Who am I? If that's not what my mother and sister, that's their vision of me. I know that their expectation is so low. It's so low that anything I do is fabulous. Okay? Because that's who they see me as. Overweight, fat and overweight, on welfare and food stamps. I'm a college graduate. Do you know my sister, they don't never acknowledge that? They never acknowledge anything I do that's positive. If I've lost 60 pounds. They've only had negative things to say about it. That's how toxic and negative my family is. That's how toxic and negative they are. So, but I will continue to shine light to them. And I know one day their darkness will crack because they deserve to know what it feels like to live in true love. Not just love of someone, but just love. In harmony. That I'm not above anything. I am at one with the trees. The trees. I'm in one with the rocks. They don't know that.